Ragnarok Ascended just dropped, and I've spent the last 12 hours digging into every corner of the map. In this video, I'm breaking down the 50 most game-changing features you need to know in Ark Ragnarok Ascended. As always with these videos, this is based on 12 hours of me testing things, so if I miss something or information changes as they update the map, all of that will be in the pinned comment. This is hands down the best remaster yet, with a ton of new content and new areas to explore, so let's dive right in. The first major change is that they added black pearls in Viking Bay, and they also made getting black pearls really annoying in the southwest coast of the map where you used to farm them. The old meta for black pearls on this map was simply to grab an angler or just go on foot to the southwest portion of the map, jump off, and go into the shallow water to collect black pearls. While this method still does work and black pearls still do spawn in this area, it's not as easy now because they added a ton of foliage which made it hard to see. I think now that they added black pearls inside of Viking Bay, which are much easier to see, the only challenge being Eurypterids spawning around them, this is a lot more visible. It's also a more accessible area. It's a lot less out of the way, especially if you have an angler. So I think once you get flippers or an angler and you're going down to farm black pearls, this is probably the best spot on the map to do it now. The other choice is going to farm Tuzos in the trench, but that's a little bit more late game than these early game black pearl farms. At number 2, I have the reduced size to the shipwreck in Viking Bay and the reduced amount of crates that are underwater. They also adjusted the number of Eurypterid spawns that are down here. There is a absolute metric ton of these down here now, and it used to be only a couple. All of these things combined mean it's not a really great choice for you to go deep underwater in Viking Bay to grab these crates in the early game anymore like it used to be. But luckily, they did adjust something else on the map, which I'll talk about in a second, which makes this not that big of a deal. You can see on screen now the comparison between the old shipwreck on the left versus the new shipwreck on the right. There's a very drastic difference in terms of how safe you are and in how many rewards there are down here. At number 3, I have the insane amount of new crates they added to the beach all across the side of Viking Bay to the west and in the jungle area. They added a bunch of new crates which give you a ton of metal tools, metal weapons. There's a lot of very good benefits of farming these across the entirety of the beaches, which makes them easily accessible, and it makes it so you don't really need Viking Bay anymore. I honestly really like this new tweak. I didn't really like swimming down into the middle of Viking Bay in the early game to get metal tools quickly in the old game. So I think this adjustment and this shift of where this early game access is nice. At number 4, I have the removal of treasure chests from the map. There used to be 2 treasure chests on the map that were unlocked at level 80. They were located in Viking Bay and in the snow biome. These chests used to be really cool if you found them. They were basically little Easter eggs that gave you a ton of really useful blueprints and weapons. They may have relocated them to other locations on the map, but for my testing, they are not here. I flew around the map for about 6 hours earlier and I did not see a single one. At number 5, I have breedable griffins. This is obviously the one that all of you know about. It's incredibly cool that we can breed griffins now, even if it's a little bit unrealistic. The fact that you're able to do this is pretty OP. The fact that you get an imprinting bonus of 30% on top of the already incredibly strong creature that is the griffin is just a really insane thing to think about. I've done a little bit of testing with it. I'm not going to spoil too much yet because I'm going to talk about it a lot more tomorrow. But just know this is by far the best flyer on the map. The wyverns do not even compare. It's way faster, its stats are ridiculous, especially with a 30% buff, and the baby griffins are incredibly cute. One more thing to note though is they are egg incubated for some reason instead of just being dropped. I thought they would have just been like a gestating thing, but they're not. They are actually eggs. This doesn't really change too much, but I figured it was worth noting. You can also see on screen the coordinates for where the most griffins are spawning on the map. They're not spawning the most in the canyon, surprisingly. They're spawning a lot more near Greenob. At number 6, I have the new bison creature, and I'm going to go into pretty much everything you need to know. The bison spawns in the highlands and on some of the new big islands, all indicated on screen now. It has high stats, an insane +6 pack buff, which gives it up to 30% damage and damage resistance boosts, and makes it a complete boss wrecker. It has a stance swap on its head being up or down that can be toggled with C on keyboard. This basically changes what its special right-click attack does. If the head is down, your special attack will fling the enemy in the air, and if your head is up, it'll do a jumping attack. Both of the special attacks scale with your charge speed, but the regular attack does not scale with charge speed. Speaking of charge speed, the bison is ridiculously quick based on how it looks, and it has a nice jumping ability as well, so you can do a lot of maneuverability with this. The bison is a knockout tame that prefers superior kibble, followed by alkaline algae, crops, and mejo berries. Don't tame this with mejo berries, please. It spawns right next to crops, so you don't really need to use mejo berries for it at all. I would recommend trapping this as well. The creature is aggressive in the wild, and if you try to knock one out, all of the bison in the area, they generally spawn in packs. It's just going to attack you and do a lot of damage. They also produce milk for you whenever you breed them and get a bison baby. Whenever a baby is born, you get milk in the female's inventory. This can be used for raising wyverns and for all of the benefits that normal milk gives you, listed on screen now. It's an awesome creature. I'll be covering even more details and applications for it tomorrow in my top Ragnarok creatures video, but for now, this should be enough for you to get started with it. At number 7, I have the entirely revamped castle in the swamp area. They completely redid this castle. They made it look absolutely awesome. They added poison wyverns to the top to defend it, and they added cat spawns to the bottom, which is also pretty nice. The ruins are also still there. They weren't removed or anything, even though this giant castle is here. And as you can see in the background of this clip, they didn't damage any of the swamp biome. The swamp biome is still the same size, and they added even more to this area. They added a whole new giant plateau island past the swamp at 47.1 10.5 with a ton of gameplay relevance. There's a lot of crystal here. There's a lot of wreck spawns here, which I always thought was not a common enough spawn on Evolved, so it's really good they added more of those. And the entire thing is just insanely flat. It's a really great spot to build a base. The other benefit of building a base here is you get that awesome looking castle in the background. And they even added a waterfall cave, which is hidden behind this waterfall right here. It has a bunch of metal in it, which is pretty nice to have as well. This could be a pretty good early game PvP spot. It's a pretty narrow opening. It isn't a crouch opening, but it's pretty narrow, so it could be a decent spot to start in. At number 9, I have the island expansions that occurred to the southwest island regions on the map. They added one extra little island to the side, and they also added a bridge. For my experience, the only major change here is that there's more Thyla spawning than before, which is nice because it gives you a really good chance to get a good Thyla, which is one of the best tames on the map. They also added 2 entirely new islands on the south side of the map. The island at 95.4, 39.8 doesn't really introduce too much in terms of new content, but it does have a ton of metal spawns on it. But the island at 94.2, 49.6 has an underwater cove area that spawns Karkinos. Taming these will be slightly annoying because there's not many great spots to set up a catapult here, but there are other areas on the map where you can tame Karkinos as well that I'll get into in a bit. Both of these islands have a really good amount of metal and are very safe besides the Karkinos, which are obviously pretty strong, so you're good to farm metal here. It's actually a really great spot. There's also a ton of aberrant polymer plants around the map, which are really good for farming organic polymer. They spawn in the cove where the Karkinos spawn, as well as in 2 other regions that I've found. I'll talk about them when I get there, but these are just incredibly good to farm. At number 13, I have the aberrant creature spawns. Aberrant creatures are spawning a lot more now in both the South Wyvern Trench and in their carnivorous cavern, which I'll get into later in the video. These creatures don't really impact much, but the fact that there's a ton of aberrant megalania on the map means that my old ranking of rarest creatures is now inaccurate for another reason, because now they're not nearly as rare. Thank you, Wildcard. I've also seen aberrant dodos, which is kind of funny, but they don't really change the game too much. At number 14, I have the giant island that's been added to the east of Red Ob at 46.5, 90.5. This is basically a midi redwoods biome that has a lot of interesting utility. There's giant bison that spawn here, Dinotherium that spawn here, and a couple of other strong creatures like Argentavis, and there's also some really cool structures that were built, which I'll show off in a second. Out of the 3 new big islands they added, this is definitely the least flat of the 3, so I wouldn't really recommend building here, but it is pretty cool. Could be a cool spot for a treehouse. It's also unquestionably the best spot for a sap farm if you want to make one of those, because it's way safer than the other redwoods biome. Building off my last point, there's some really cool pre-built structures off this island. There's a bridge that connects this island to the mainland, and another castle they added at the end of the bridge, which canvases down the entire side of the island back down to the water, which also looks awesome. This location could be really cool for building a base in my opinion, but building on the actual island itself is a little bit underwhelming. Next, let's get into all the Ark additions and other new creatures that were added to the map. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about the Karkinos and the other aberrant variant creatures that we already talked about, but there's a ton of other creatures that got added. The first of many is the Phaslosuchus, which spawns absolutely everywhere in the desert. It's really good for farming flint, and I definitely think it's easier to tame on this map than the other maps in the game because there's so many rocks in the Ragnarok desert. Another new creature is the Dinotherium. This spawns mainly on the Redwood Island I just talked about at 46.5, 90.5. This creature is just incredibly strong. You can use it in boss fights for extra buffs, and the stats are really good too. It's also decent for farming. The Dinosuchus also spawns here, and it spawns primarily in the mini swamp at 20.6, 41.2 near the Viking Bay Castle. I haven't seen nearly as many spawns for this in the other main swamp area as I have here, so just go here if you're looking for Dinosuchus. The Ceratosaurus spawns on the entire new swamp island we talked about earlier at 47.1, 10.5 very commonly. And the Zitvactinus also spawns a ridiculous amount just about everywhere on the map. The only Ark Additions creature that isn't here from my exploration so far is the Archelon, which should be fixed or brought to the map. It definitely belongs here. It would be a really good addition. The last creature thing I'm going to talk about is the new paid DLC creature spawning and the old paid DLC and the Pyromane spawning. I'll talk about the Drakeling and the Veilwind later in the video, but for now, just know these all do spawn on the map. Up next, I have the final massive island that I haven't talked about yet. There's a massive island off the coast of the Highlands at 9.9, 87.1. This island is a fantastic base location due to it being close to the Highlands, redwoods, lava biome, and the snow. There's just a ton of value nearby. It also has a ton of resources on it like metal. The Argentavis spawn here too, which is incredibly convenient if you start in the Highlands. and it just makes starting out in the Highlands a better choice than it already was when it was already the best pick. There's also a bridge connecting this to the main Highlands too, so you can easily travel back and forth if you're on the early game with an Equus. It's just a great spot. The base is super flat if you build it here. Amazing addition. There's also a new lake on this new island at 12.9, 85.9, which has a bunch of giant beaver dams and a ton of beaver spawns. Really convenient as well for a new spot to get cementing paste. One more side effect of this island being added was that there's been a reduction in the amount of Basilosaurus corpses that are spawning on the beach around the map. It's kind of annoying they did this because these are really good to farm for early game resources, but there are still some in the surrounding area. At the halfway mark, I have the entire South Wyvern Cave revamp. It's a bigger opening, there's massive visual overhauls, way better lighting, and a lot more creature variety inside. There's also a lot of those organic polymer flowers I talked about earlier in here, which are really great to farm if you're safe. Just a fantastic change, makes getting the eggs out of here a lot easier too. At number 26, I have the Carnivorous Caverns revamp. They made it a lot brighter. They added a ton of aberration features like aberration creatures, a ton of Megalosaurus, Carcinos, the aberrant flowers from earlier that give you a lot of organic polymer. And it just looks amazing in general. This cave used to be a bit grim. I did like building here actually. It was a pretty good hidden base spot. Nobody ever really checked it. But now it's a lot more visually appealing, and there's a ton of Carcinos spawning here, way more than that cove I talked about earlier. If you're looking for Carcinos on the map, this is the place to go. Just be careful because there are really high level bugs that are supposed to make it a little bit more difficult, but it shouldn't be that bad to avoid them. Most of them are front loaded to the front of the cave, and in the back of the cave, it's pretty much just the Carcinos. At number 27, I have the changes to the two mini waterfall caves in the Highlands. They made some pretty major changes to the metal and obsidian giant base spot cave that was here. Out front, it used to be very shallow water, but now it's actually a pretty deep pond. This makes it a little bit more easily defensible because people can't just run straight in at full speed because there is, yet again, water in the front. On the downside though, they did remove the obsidian from this cave, which is pretty disappointing to me. I was a big fan of having obsidian here for when you start in the Highlands. Now you're going to have to travel a lot further to get obsidian in the early game. The other mini waterfall cave here though, which was the crystal cave, is the exact same as it was in Evolved. It's in the same place and it has the exact same amount of crystals, so it's pretty nice that it's still there. They overhauled the canyons pretty much entirely in terms of aesthetics, and it's pretty much the best looking biome in the entirety of Ark history now, in my opinion. They didn't ruin it like the center. They did way too much junglifying of everything, and I was worried they would do it for this map too. But luckily, they just enhanced the look of the canyon, which was already one of the best looking biomes ever in Ark. They also added a bit more water on the outskirts of the canyons at high elevations to accommodate for the new water system that doesn't use irrigation pipes. This was really good foresight by them because it would have been pretty annoying to have to drag water up from the canyon up to one of these tall pillars, so good change. At number 29, I have the changes to silica pearls aesthetics. They made the silica pearls sparkle like they used to in Ark Evolved. This is a fantastic quality of life improvement. Actually being able to see the pearls when you're farming them is very nice. Speaking of silica pearls, they also reduced the quantity of silica pearls spawning in the canyon water. This is still the best spot on the map to farm silica pearls by a pretty big margin. There's still a ton here, but there is less than there was in Evolved. They also made changes to the crystal waterfall cave in the desert at 55.1, 56.9. I think they made this cave a bit smaller. I don't know if I'm tripping or not, but it looks smaller to me by a decent margin. They also filled it with way more green color. I think it's a bit of a worse base spot in general now. The reason it's worse is because there's less space on the inside, and they also peeled back the roof a little bit on top so people can drop down soakers a lot easier now. Defending this just got a lot harder and less worthwhile with the reduced space. I think after these changes and the changes they made to the waterfall cave in the Highlands, the waterfall cave in the Highlands is simply a better choice. It's easily defensible and there's about as much space. Speaking of the desert, they've actually introduced sandstorms and thunderstorms that can now occur as normal weather events that behave similarly to scorched earth. I am not a huge fan of this, but I do get it. It's definitely not the worst thing in the world and it does make the map more immersive, but I just don't like these events. Another thing that I don't really like at all is the map coordinate system being skewed from everything that it was in Evolved now. The reason for this is because of them adding islands on the outside of the map to increase the size. All of the coordinates are now just a bit off. The major issue for me when I was doing this is I used to use coordinates to find the ice wyvern egg locations, and now they're just not in the same spots. Luckily for you though, I did a little bit of research and I also flew around for about an hour in the ice biome, so I do have a good amount of locations for you. On screen now, you can see the coordinates to a bunch of the most notable places that I found when looking for wyvern eggs: 49.1, 32.7, 48.3, 56.3, 34.1, 37.6, 44.4, 58.9, and approximately 35.7, 68.6. There should also be egg locations around 3761 on this lake. The spawns for the ice wyverns are super common here, but I just couldn't find any nests personally. All of these are very easy to find spots though. They made the eggs a little bit more visible in the new game, which is nice. One more thing that's important to note for the Ice Wyvern eggs is they now don't only spawn in the Murder Snow, but other snow biomes as well. I'm not going to give you coordinates for these ones. They're just really, really obviously visible. They're at the peaks of every single mountain in the other 2 snow biomes. These eggs are more easily accessible because the weather is a lot less harsh there. And I really like this change. Being able to get Ice Wyverns earlier in the game is good, especially considering they're not really that good of a Wyvern type. Being able to get them easier than the other 3 eggs if you're not very experienced with getting the other 3 eggs is probably more logical. Another major change I've seen is a lot less crops spawning across the entire map. On Ragnarok Evolved, there was a ton of rock carrots and save roots all across the highlands and in some other areas, and now there's really only a few spawns for them. There's still definitely an okay amount, like there's way more on this map than any other map in the game because this map is known for it, but I would have liked there to be more. Another small island they added is at 1.2 35.5. This is an extremely tiny island with basically no resources on it. I think pretty much the only purpose for this is to serve as a hidden base if you're a solo or small tribes player and nobody is going to notice the spot. I only noticed the spot because I was on a website and saw a little speck in the water. So it should be a pretty decent spot to hide if you're in the early game, if you're just trying to hide some stuff. Another small new landmass is on the bottom right of the map. There's basically these mini islands. It's kind of like an archipelago in a sort of way off the desert. The way I view these being used is you can kind of bridge a couple of these together, make a cool base that's on top of the water, and then have an underwater pen right below your base. I think it could be a cool thing, but you'd have to be pretty creative. Another small con for this map is the water creature spawn rates currently are pretty unbalanced. A lot of sections of the water just feel really empty, which is disappointing because this map's spawn balancing is one of its biggest strengths in Ark Evolved. I do think with the original team working on this map, this is going to get fixed pretty quickly, but it is an issue currently. Another issue I have with the spawn rates on this map is the lack of Spino spawns in the canyon. There used to be so many of these spawning at once. There used to be at least 5 or 6 every single time you went here. I've traveled to this area 4 times flying through, and I've only seen more than 2 Spinos once. There's 2 problems with this. The first is that I like taming Spinos, and this is the best spot on the map to get Spinos, so I would like to have more here so I could get high levels. And secondarily, farming the Spinos at the bottom of the canyon was one of the best ways to get XP on this map. The amount of XP that Spinos give you when you kill them, plus the Explorer notes nearby, is just a really good combo for XP, so you're gonna have to find a new way to level up on this map. Back to the bright side, they completely reworked the Labyrinth Cave. I'm not going to spoil too much for now because I'm doing a full guide for this cave later in the week in my map full guide video, but there's so many cool changes. There's more traps, there's tougher traps, the entire cave looks way better, there's multiple paths that present different challenges, and they added an uncomfortable amount of baby Aranias. That last thing really isn't a positive, but the rest definitely was. Another massive change they made was to the boss fight. The old Manticore and Dragon Arena boss has completely changed. The Manticore and Dragon are dead, and they're frozen over in the new arena with the Ice Wyvern boss named Noonatak. I hope I pronounced that right. This new boss is significantly harder than the old arena for my testing. It has a way better stat pool, it has the Manticore spike attack, and an ice breath that operates pretty similarly to the Dragon's breath in terms of damaging carnivores by a percentage. And the boss summons Ice Worm Queens around, which is just ridiculous. The Ice Worms have 15,000 HP a pop on the alpha difficulty, and the boss itself has 1.2 million HP. It's an awesome fight, it's really fun to take on, and the boss rewards 550 element compared to the old 410 that the arena gave, so that's a nice boost. The tech crime unlocks are a little bit lacking, but they do give you most of the stuff. They do miss the tech turret, helmet, and boots, but besides that, it does have pretty much everything you'll need. Honestly, the biggest issue with this boss is how expensive it is to summon it, but it's Ragnarok, we're pretty used to this by now. It also gives you a Noonatak flag and a Noonatak trophy. Both of these look pretty cool. The last thing I had to point out was that the battle theme music is the same across the entire map. I think this is probably just a mistake and they'll fix it in a couple weeks, but it was really annoying listening to the same song for 2 hours before I turned the music off. Just to preface, the last 6 features in this video cover the Lost Colony expansion pack. This is just a brief overview of the features. I'm not going to go too into detail because I think they're really cool to explore by yourself, but they're just too cool not to mention. The 6 features include 2 paid DLC creatures, the Veilwyn and the Drakeling. The Veilwyn is basically a worse Armadago right now. It follows you and gives you a bunch of buffs if you want them, and the taming method is extremely easy. They spawn in the snow on pretty much every map besides the island. The rumor I've heard is that it's going to have 2 more forms, kind of like the Ferox, once Lost Colony actually releases fully, but for now it's only just this first tier. And the Drakeling is significantly cooler than the Veilwyn, at least currently. The Drakeling is a little bit more interesting in my opinion. It has 4 forms that spawn in different biomes around the map. The taming process involves you getting it on your shoulder with a torch and then going and killing stuff to get experience to get it tamed. You basically just feed it kibble in between every single round of getting XP, and you do it a couple times to get it tamed. It's pretty cool. All forms of the Drakeling offer slow falling abilities to prevent fall damage. They can store experience from when you're traveling around, and then you can pass the experience onto a tame that you have. And if you're in the biome that the Drakeling is from, it'll give you a melee damage boost of 5%, a 15% harvesting boost, and a 10% XP and loot quality boost. They also give you treasure maps sometimes when you kill stuff, which is also extremely neat. If you kill something and you have a Drakeling on you, there's a chance of getting a treasure map, and then you can use it to go find drops around the map. Very cool. A tech bunker feature, which lets you dig into the floor and build a base down there. Building presets using a template hammer, which is a new item. This basically gives you presets to choose from when you're building a base if you're not super creative. This is something I will definitely be using. They also added a skill tree, which is incredibly cool. Syntac made a whole video on this, so I'm not going to cover it too much, but there's just a lot of ridiculously strong stuff here, and I'm not really a huge fan of it, to be honest. I think the concept is incredibly cool, but the pay-to-win nature of it, so far at least, until they balance it, is just something I'm not a huge fan of. And last, but certainly not least, is the Dark Tech Skin cosmetic costumes. This thing just looks really cool. Absolutely my favorite skin in the game now. I will be using this in all of my videos. Well, those are the biggest changes I found. I have 2 videos coming later in the week, one where I rank the best creatures on Rag Ascended, and one where I make my classic full guide video for the map. Thank you to all my members. If you enjoyed, I guarantee you that you'll enjoy the video linked on screen now, where I rank the 20 best cave creatures in Ark. The caves are by far Ragnarok's hardest objective, so this video will help you in your efforts. See you there. Peace.